Good morning, everybody. We appreciate y'all getting up early and getting down here, fighting the traffic. I know some of our folks on I-65 are dealing with some kind of accident between here and Birmingham, and had a couple of calls already. But we want to welcome you real quickly to the 2024 Media Day and Kickoff Classic press conference, which will come at 11 o'clock. First, we want to get started. The one thing, hey, Rodney, do we have anybody working the PowerPoint? I don't have the clicker. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. And Ron, you want to hit those lights too? That might help. Sorry. We're going to dim the lights because of the pictures. This is a right-handed clicker, guys. Y'all going to have to bear with me. I'm left-handed. But anyway, we're glad you're here. But my first order of business. Let's see. How does it? Which? What? No. Go past me.
I'm gonna go back to the start. Let you start.
Then what am I hitting? Okay. Okay. First, this is our staff now. As you can see, we've got we have a few vacancies right now. Mr. Harmon is on board, and he'll be filling those as soon as possible. But now, what we would like to do is bring Mr. Harmon, the Executive Director of the Alabama High School Athletic Association, to the mic to welcome you, and then we'll get started in just a minute with the roundtable.
I want to start by just saying that we're saddened to hear the news of passing of one of our student athletes, and we're just in prayer for that family, that community, and that school. I think it would be good at this time if we could just have a moment of silence and thought and prayer for those people. Thank you. I do want to say, thanks to the media for the coverage of the 2023-2024 school year. Very appreciative for what the media does. I am about a month and a half in as executive director, but I have been in roles where I've been able to work with media primarily in Northeast Alabama around Calhoun County, and we have excellent media there, and always appreciative of what they do, and I'm sure we'll build the same relationships, or I'll be able to build the same relationships in this role. I do want to say that, probably, with this being, a month and a half in, this is more of just introductory remarks of kind of the talking points that I have coming in. Next year, this will look different for me because it'll be more of a state of the association type deal presentation. But right now, with me being brand new, I just want to say that I am very excited to be joining an outstanding staff. And you'll be able to hear from that staff today, as well as we do have some openings that we'll be filling, and we'll be able to fill those positions with some outstanding people as well. But I'm very aware and appreciative of the fact that I'm able to join an outstanding staff, and so that's really big. And then an outstanding association. We have a lot of things that we're very proud of. Had a chance right out of the gates to attend the summer meeting, National Federation summer meeting, and had lots of people talking about the things that they know that we do as a state association. As I met some of the other executive directors across the nation, there are some things that we're very proud of. Now, in any association, there's always things that you'll find that you feel like are going really well, and you want to protect that, and then other things that, as you assess, that you can work on, and we'll certainly do that. Me personally, I'm very interested in leadership. I've always been, interested in studying leaders and strategic leadership, and part of that is to make sure that you are determining the current reality. And so that's really where I'm at right now. And once you are able to do that, you then figure out where it is that you're going and then how you're going to get there. And as a matter of fact, we had our strategic committee meeting yesterday, and so I'm coming in kind of in the middle of that. They've already had at least one meeting prior to yesterday, but I was able to join the strategic committee meeting, which is really important. And whenever I talk about strategic plans, you really start to think about that 30,000-foot view. And most of the time, the things that you want to talk about are boots on the ground, what's actually happening, decisions that are being made, actions that are being played out. But I do think it's important to mention the strategic plan, because once you develop your mission, then everything runs through that filter, because I think that that keeps everybody on the same page. And I will say this, whenever I talk about being on the same page, that's a cliche. There's nothing wrong with cliches. We use them all the time, and most everybody knows what they mean. But you have to make sure that you have the same definition when you're using those terms. So when you hear me talk about being on the same page, you'll hear me use the word coherence. And coherence is when you have a shared understanding about the work. And when you have a shared understanding about the work and you filter everything through your mission, then that keeps your action steps in line with that. And you have that coherence. And any effective organization has to be coherent. So being on the same page is what I'm talking about with that. And so that just allows you to make sure that you're revisiting that in the decisions that you make. And so when I talk about that, we are working on our next 5-year strategic plan. But we do have parts of our strategic plan that are very important to us at this time, our existing plan, which is student learning, sportsmanship, safety, and lifelong values. So when you think about that, we are education-based athletics. And so the learning component of that is very important. Our coaches, our administrators, our teachers, and as a matter of fact, you always can tell the best coaches are your best teachers, because there's a lot of teaching and learning that goes on. And so we want to protect the things that keep us in that realm of education-based athletics. And education-based athletics, this is not an over-exaggeration. It's my belief and a belief that's shared with many others, that education-based athletics is a really important part of our democratic society. Student athletes are able to learn things through athletics that helps them be, a productive citizen. With sportsmanship, it's very important that we continue to emphasize sportsmanship. We want our student athletes to compete. We want them to strive to be the best. We want them to prepare and do the things that's necessary for that. But we also want to have respect for one another. And I think through education-based athletics, that's something that we take a lot of pride in and we emphasize, because in society, that's not what we always see. We often see when people disagree, it's easier to call the other person evil or to come up with some kind of way to try to disparage the other person instead of having some type of civil discourse. But you can see in athletic events, you can use a lot of different examples, but you have student athletes who are fiercely competing against one another. And then when the competition's over, they're shaking hands, a winner's been declared, and they're showing sportsmanship. And so we have things where we try to promote that. I don't remember the number of schools, but at the summer conference, we were able to recognize the schools that had not received a fine or an ejection. And I'm the former principal of Oxford High School. I was very proud to be able to stand up as the former principal of Oxford High School, because we were on that list. So it can be done, and it's important. And then safety, we want to make sure that we're always filtering every decision we do through the priority of safety. And then lifelong values. You hear people say all the time that, at some point your playing days are going to be over. But the values that you learn and the things that are emphasized during your experience in education-based athletics are going to go on with you. So I think those are important parts of our existing strategic plan that we want to make sure that we're continuing to filter decisions through. And then that is based on the foundation of integrity. And so to me, when I talk about integrity, that's really the evolution of leadership. I think as leaders, you are growing and developing. You're always learning. Your experiences are teaching you, and you're evolving and growing into that integrity. And to me, when I talk about integrity of leadership, it is the stamina and the willingness to consistently make the correct decisions no matter how hard they are. And that's not easy, and I don't shy away from that. But so that's actually in our strategic plan, that the foundation of that is integrity. So that's very important. And then the consistent enforcement of our rules. So that is something that we are committed to. Everything should be able to be traced back to a rule in our handbook, and we should be able to consistently make the correct decisions and enforcements of our rules. So that's very important. And just want to say that once again, we have something very special in education-based athletics, and we need to do everything that we can to protect that. So the other thing that I would say is that in any leadership role, you are always trying to make sure that you are progressive, that you are leading the organization forward in a progressive manner, while at the same time protecting the things that you would never change that keep your association what it is. And so that's easier said than done. You can put that in a nice, neat statement like that, but the leading an organization through making sure that you are progressive while at the same time protecting that which makes you what you are, that's something that I am very interested in doing as well. So just looking forward to building a relationship with you, appreciate everything that you do. And like I said, today would be more, it's my first media day, so it would be more of me just kind of telling you some basics about me. In future media days, I'll be at a point there where we could do more of a state of the association where we are. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Before we get started with our next part of our program, we're gonna introduce the staff that's up here. But I do want to tell you, this is my 51st year of being involved in high school athletics and getting paid for it. They didn't pay me when I was in high school at the Brundage Banner. But I did get a call this past week that reminded me that I've been in it a long time. There's a brouhaha between ARAB and Aniana right now. The brouhaha is about who won the 1951 state title. And they called me and wanted me to settle it. Nobody remembers much about it. I was not born. I was born in 1952, so I was not there. But Aniana said the game was there and they won the game. And ARAB says the game was at their place and they should have won the game. What happened is on the last play of the game, ARAB says the running back was stopped on the 1-yard line, and the official, who was probably from ARAB, said, game over, ARAB wins. The score would have been, I think, 22-16. But here comes the referee, and he says, wait a minute, he scored. Aniana won the game. They won 23-22. So that's where they left it in 1951. And they wanted me to tell them, A, where was the game played, because they're arguing about that. And 2, could they get a plaque at ARAB for being the state champion that they should have won? And I said, well, this was not ARAB people today. Now, this was ARAB people that were probably at that game. And I told them, I said, first off, we did not handle state championships back then. Those were mythical state championships in the real sense of the word. And that probably if you could find somebody that was alive, officials, withholding, excuse me, Ken, you might could get a better understanding. And they wanted to know about where they could find articles. And did I write anything about it? And I said, no, I didn't. I was not born then. But if the Birmingham News wrote about it, where I was at for many years, you could go to probably the local college, maybe the Jacksonville State University's library, and you can go to Birmingham or come to that state archives, and you can look up. You can look up that. You can get that publication. You could probably get the Scottsboro paper, the ARAB paper, and you could probably get the Aniana paper, the Blount County or whatever it was at that time. So, and you could probably read the articles. And if it was a state championship caliber game and Birmingham News covered it, you could probably get it there, or the Post-Herald, or maybe the Anniston Star. It's all kinds of places if you're willing to make a little trip. And the guy says, you mean I got to drive all the way to Montgomery to see all that? I said, once you do, give yourself a week, because once you get in the archives and start looking, it does take a while. The reason I'm relating this story to you is there's a lot of times we as sports writers in this business, when I was doing it, we would, instead of doing our homework, we would jump quickly and just call somebody that might have already done their homework and try to ask them. And then whether we are accurate or not, you run with it. That's not the way you really need to do your business. And I'm not here to tell you that because you already know that. But the reason I'm saying that is one thing with the AHSAA is what you're looking at up here is some major resources. Major resources. These are the people that manage the sports events. These are the people that check the eligibility. These are the people that know the rules and regulations. And Mr. Harmon is now the person in charge of all of that. And with that said, the reason that we're going to have this roundtable today is so y'all can ask them some questions. We had several submitted. We're going to go over those first, and if we have time, we'll take some from the crowd. If you have something related, raise your hand, if you will, and we'll go to that. But I think this will be very informative, and I think when it's all over with, you'll realize that there's a lot of resources on our website that give you the answers, because most every answer you're going to hear up here is probably going to come from one major source, and that is the AHSAA handbook, because that's what we have to live by. That's what our guidelines are. But so first I want to introduce who we have here. First we have Kim Vickers. She is Associate Executive Director. She's been here since 2015, and this may be the smartest lady I've ever met. We don't have Amy up here, but Amy is she's our CFO, and she manages our money, and she manages our school's money, and she manages our office, and she's an incredible lady. And we have Marvin Chou. Some people call him Chow, particularly when the basketball tournament was at Alabama State, right, Marvin? Mr. Chow. But Marvin is an incredibly smart individual too. He knows Dragonfly inside and out. He knows eligibility. He's also manages swimming. He manages cross country. The list is about a mile long, actually, but he's taken those two sports when he got here it was at one level, and now it's at a level that's on par with everybody in the country. And if you watch the Olympics this past week, or last few weeks, you saw Paige Madden of UMS Wright that won a bronze and silver medal, I believe, in the Olympics this year. And she has, if you go to our record book and look up swimming, her name is all over it. Next, we have Ken Washington. I call him Kim Patterson all the time, but that's because I worked with Ken at the Birmingham News a long time, but he did not know anything about officiating. It wasn't on purpose. But Mr. Washington is our Director of Officials. He has officiated at every level from, I guess, youth ball all the way to the NBA. So especially in basketball, but he does manage our officials. If you have questions about officiating, maybe rules or whatever, he's the man. If he doesn't know it, he knows where to find the answer. And next we have Devin. Devin Booth is what I call that. She is that MVP every team has to have. Whatever you need done, she does it. She does it with a smile, even if she doesn't want to. But she grew up in Opp, Alabama, and she learned from some great coaches. She's worked with great coaches at every level, and she has been such an asset here because she is a worker bee. She really knows how to get the job done, and we appreciate her. And next we have JT Lawrence. You have to learn how to take him. He's got the best humor you've ever seen, and if you know what's humor. But JT is a guy that hit the ground running here too. He is another worker bee. He is a man that gets the job done, and they do a lot of work together. If you saw our summer conference, those two individuals stepped in at the last minute and pulled it off remarkably. When our director of the Coach Association retired and moved to another job about a month beforehand. But they're constantly doing great things. There's not a sport that they can't manage, and not really. They get it. Both of them are tremendous. And then in the back with the camera in his hand is David Holtzford. What is it? 6.6 million impressions, isn't it, on our 6.6 million impressions on our social media accounts just in the past year. And we had a 3.2, David, tell me, what was that again? Engagement rate. A 3.2 engagement rate. Now, and that's not it's not a dating service, no. But 3.2 engagement rate refers to people that actually see it and look further. And 1.8 is about average. 3.0 is outstanding. 3.2 is more than outstanding. And that's a tribute to David working with our social media. And that's just a few of the numbers that he shared with me yesterday, and that we're going to share with y'all later on sometime in a news story. And now we're going to get started with the roundtable. We're going to have to pass this mic around, so bear with us. We do thank OPM for being here today, and they're going to be here all the way through the press conference later on today. So we had several questions that were submitted. We're going to go down these, and if we have time, we're going to take some more from the audience, from the crowd here, if you have some. And if you see something you want to ask about, with a question that's being asked that they're answering, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. The first one, and it's probably going to be directed at Devin, because she now manages flag football, which she would have been good at. How many schools are now playing flag football, and what do you think about the sport's growing popularity throughout the state?
Thank you, Ron. This year we'll have 113 teams playing in flag football championship. It's our first year as a sanctioned sport, so we're really excited about that. You know, when we began in 2021, we only had 50 schools. I'll say only, but which was a great number for our first year, but we've more than doubled now in beginning our fourth year. And we have two separate classifications now. 1A through 5A will have 51 teams compete, and 6A and 7A will have 62 teams compete. So I do, as I talk about flag football, I don't want to miss a chance to kind of give a shout out to the Atlanta Falcons and the NFL flag. They've really done a great job in providing our schools with grants and kind of getting those schools that were interested in flag football but maybe weren't there financially, and they really stepped in and have gotten, you know, our numbers up, even with schools that potentially couldn't have fielded a team.
Thank you. This next question goes to Ken. And this question is, what are the rules changes in high school football this year? What about other sports? And will the shot clock be mandatory in basketball?
All right, we're going to do this at one at a time, I guess. Okay, cool.
We'll have to move the chairs back a little bit. We'll move the chairs back. And we'll just leave this microphone in here then.
Just stay right here, Ron.
Okay.
I really thought for a moment Ron was promoting instant replay, but for regular season.
I love it.
Yeah. So we'll just start with volleyball. Volleyball's not many rule changes. Those who have watched volleyball, there has been some talk about the doubles, stand on the same side. Should that be a point for the other team? You'll see that lax this year because they feel that if they're going to do a double on their side, it's on their side. It's not an advantage, disadvantage about going on their side. Prolonged contact, defining that. I'm not going to go into all the definitions on those things. I think those are not what you want to hear going forward. Football, there's wasn't many rule changes there. If you're up in the press box, it probably was hard to see some of those numbers down. So this year, those numbers have to be solid numbers, and they have to be clearly contrasting with the uniform. And that was the only rule changes for football this year. They feel like football's in a good spot, and there was no need to changing a lot of the rules. But we will be enforcing sportsmanship. That's always at the forefront. Uniform, if you've been watching college or NFL, knee pads are like non-existing. But we do want to protect our student athletes on a high school level, and this is coming from the National Federation. So that is a point of emphasis. So officials are going to be asked to enforce that rule. You'll probably see players go out. We're asking them to do it early so they can get that rectified going forward. Softball will be using one-way communication devices, even if it's a two-way equipment like your Apple Watch that some of you guys are wearing, or women are wearing in here today. They'll be able to use that, but they only can use it one way. If they're caught using it other than what it's used for, they'll be restricted to the dugout, and they won't be allowed to use that device the remainder of the contest. In baseball, we're trying to improve the communication between referees and coaches. We're trying to encourage our coaches not to charge the umpires. In some of our write-ups, we look at officials. You ask them what charging is. It could be walking to the official, but in our minds, charging is running out, as you see in the major leagues or whatnot. But we want to improve communication throughout our sports, not just in baseball. Wrestling, there's some definition stuff there, just clarifying what's inbounds, out of bounds, and they want to promote scoring there where they have affected the point ratings somewhat, and they want to encourage more of a pin more than awarding points in other instances. Do anybody have any questions for me? Basketball, shot clock. That was his last one. Thank you so much. Shot clock. That is not mandatory for our schools this year. It's more of a experimental process. We just want to make sure we're getting it right and allowing schools to start utilizing it in their non-area games. And if a school comes to a site that doesn't want to use it, we'll just turn them off, and we won't use those shot clocks during that ball game. So it has to be mutually agreed upon. Yes, sir. Yes, it's just one way. I can't send it back, and it has to be done from the dugout. Yeah, and that's just with the catcher. Yes, sir. Anything else? All right. If y'all think of anything, I'll be around. What is the shot clock length? 35 seconds. If we're in the front court, it'd be 25 seconds. Any foul violation that is non-shooting or violation in the front court, it'd be 25. If you guys been on the social media and listen to some of the coaches, some of our high school teams are awesome at holding that ball for 2 or 3 minutes. And some of our fans coming to watch the game, they get a little frustrated at that. And it's going to improve the flow of the game. I think you're going to see a lot more shots going up and better game flow. And I think it'll be a little bit more enjoyable to watch. But those who have used it thus far, they don't really see a difference. But those teams that really can hold that ball, I think late in the game you'll start seeing where it's going to help get more possessions in.
So can the officials keeping up with that, even if there's not a shot clock up, or is that what you're saying?
What do you?
35-second shot clock.
Yes.
Even without the clock, or the officials?
Well, without the clock, it's nothing to keep up with. Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
So championship events.
Yeah, we want.
Hold 2 or 3 minutes, they can still hold to it.
Yeah, they can still do it because in our championship contest, we're not using shot clock yet. So we're really just trying to see what we want to do. If we want to use 30 seconds, 35 seconds, and really just trying to figure out what the coaches in our schools, our member schools want. Is that it? All right, I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all.
Okay, thank you. The next one is one that everybody's talking about. What's next for NIL on the high school level in Alabama? Are you supportive of a new rule or guideline that specifically addresses this issue? I guess we'd start with you first, Mr. Harmon.
So whenever you say NIL, it is one of those things that is definitely, a hot topic. It grabs people's attention. And so for me, it's very important that we have a plan. So the first step in that is kind of looking at researching and studying what people are doing with that to decide the direction that we're going in. Now, one thing that I will say is that, when I talked earlier about the things that you would protect, you want to be progressive, but you also want to protect. That's what we have to look at with education-based athletics. What are we protecting? Who's going to manage this type deal? And how are we going to be progressive? Because we know that we've got to have a plan. So with that, if you look at what other states are doing, and I'll say this, we're never, under my leadership, we're never going to drag our feet, but we're also going to make sure that we're not reckless. So that's why we got to make sure we do our research on the front end. But because some other states are doing some work with NIL, you will see some mistakes that they will make right out of the gate. And with that, initially looking at this, what people have done is taken their amateur rule. So if you look at your amateur rule and you look at people maybe rewording that a little bit or just renaming it as NIL. So with that, you've got to think through, what it is that you're saying that your student athletes cannot do as opposed to what they can do, because the amateur rule is going to protect, the fact that you can't benefit from your performance. So I know I'm being a little bit more general at this point, but the commitment to researching that, to making sure that we understand all the components of that and coming up with a plan is what we're going to do. If you look at some of the states around us, they would pass a plan. They might even name it NIL, and maybe a month later they're having to go in and amend it within a month or two because there may be some unintended consequences that they're not thinking about. So we want to make sure in our plan that we're very thorough in protecting our education-based athletics and our amateur role.
Mr. Harmon, as you mentioned about the amateur rule, how do our bylaws speak to the amateur rule and how they are enforced?
So you can't benefit financially for performance, and that's basically what we're looking at when we look at the amateur rule, is that somebody is not benefiting financially for their athletic performance. So I guess to sum up what I said, we understand that this is something that needs to be researched. We're in the process of doing that research, studying this, and making sure that the Alabama High School Athletic Association has a plan.
Mr. Harmon, while you're up here, one of the other questions was about the increase of the amount of the gift that's available from outside camps that went from $250 to $1,200. The question was, how are Alabama rules for players being able to earn that money from the NIL or different other states? How's it different, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so we would have probably other members of the staff that could talk a little bit more about the that history of that being passed. But basically, that is if you attend a camp. Of course, you're not benefiting financially from athletic performance, but you might go to a camp and they might have a certain thing where they give shoes. Well, if you looked at the initial amount, which I think was $250, now you're lucky to find the kind of shoes that they're wanting to give that would be, $250 or less. So that amount is allowing for those gifts.
Thank you. Okay, next, there's a perception that there are more transfers than ever in Alabama high school in high school athletes. Do we agree? Is there a way the AHSAA can curb or reverse this trend? This is probably a good question for our Director of Eligibility. Ms. Kim?
Yes, if you pay attention to social media, you'll hear students or see student athletes make comments that they are proud to announce that they are transferring or going to finish their high school career at a certain school, and they're imitating what they see our collegiate athletes doing when they're entering the transfer portal. They go out and make that announcement that they are making a transfer. But I just would like to say, when you go back and look at the history of transfers across the state, we started studying our transfer numbers back in 2016. At that time, we asked every school across our state that are members of the association to submit to our office the number of transfers that they had that are participating in athletics. Not just transfers, but transfers that are specifically now participating in athletics at a new school. In 2016, Wanda Gillen, that worked here at the time, and Tony Stallworth and I, we sat down and manually, because we didn't have the ability to do it with software, we manually counted up that number of transfers. In 2016, it was approximately like 3,659 transfers in 1 year across the state of Alabama. Now we are able to track those transfers. Do we see the trend changing? Not actually, no, we don't. We don't see the trend changing. We see our families are more transient than they were back in the 80s. You know, when I was in high school, families did not move. You know, they homesteaded and they established homes in a community, and that's where they stayed until, you know, they died in those homes. That's not what our society is doing today. You know, many of our families, they are working from home, so it's an easy thing to pack up and move somewhere else if your child wants to go somewhere else to school. We have not done the transfer data for this year, but we do see an average of every year, approximately anywhere from the high 2,000s to the high 3,000 number of transfers across the state. What we see is the main difference. People know about it now because of social media. You know, back in the earlier days in 2016, our kids were not putting it out there on social media that I'm proud to announce I'm transferring to this school, to that school. The AHSAA does investigate transfers when we're asked to. You know, it is the school's responsibility to manage those transfers, with the principal having that ultimate responsibility. But it's the school's responsibility to check to make sure that those students are compliant to all AHSA rules. If our assistance is needed, then we are called in to investigate, and with a thorough investigation to make sure the transfers are compliant. Any other questions about transfers? Oh, I'm sorry. Ben?
It seems like a lot of them happen or later, like the week of school. I know I've talked to some coaches about concern. We've worked as a student all year and now they're transferring. Is there any concern about that or any way you can address it?
We asked the question why ourselves. You know, and we had a situation just a few weeks ago of a student athlete that transferred. He summer practiced all summer long with his one school, and then 3 weeks before school starts, he transfers to another. And you ask the question, why did you transfer? And he said, well, I got mad because I found out I was not going to get to play the position I wanted to play, and I could move to this school, and Mama said, let's move. So we moved. It's not uncommon to see those types of things happen. You know, like I said, years ago, that would have never happened. But today it is. You know, things like that are happening. Students want to play where their teams are winning. They're going to transfer where facilities are nicer than what they have. And, you know, we see it every day. You know, their indoor facility is better than mine, I'm going to practice there. If their winning record is better than mine, I'm going to play there. And we're seeing that trend more so than we used to.
One school in Jefferson County lost 25 kids this year to transfer to football. What are the chances that those kids legally transferred because the principal can't get the information from the other schools to confirm players? What are they supposed to do?
Well, we request, excuse me, when we have a school that is concerned over transfers, we ask that school to send us the information. And once we receive the information, you know, from school A, let's just say school A loses 5 players or 5 students this year and going to one particular school. If they're concerned with it, then send us the information. Then we forward that information on to the receiving school and say, investigate these transfers. You know, investigate them to let us know if they're legitimate and they're compliant with all of the AHSA rules. If when we get that information back, if we have questions about it, we continue the investigation. And at that point, we start at our office first, and then if needed, we send our AHSA investigators out to begin the more in-depth questioning and so forth. But if we're asked to, we're going to investigate them, especially if, 100%, if a school sends it to us, we're going to investigate it. Any other? Yes, sir.
How do you balance the private schools problem? There's a lot of kids moving to private schools, especially in my area. Or people are claiming all these kids are trying to go to private schools now. Is that something you're concerned about?
You would be surprised if you saw the transfer data. Our transfer data is higher in our public schools than they are our private schools. And we're seeing more so now because of the school choice. You know, now that schools are, you know, they can accept kids, an open enrollment. We're seeing a lot of that changing. But you would be surprised if you actually saw the data. The data is we have more students transferring to public schools that they're not zoned to attend than transferring to private schools. Any others about transfers? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Kim. Well, yes, sir.
Can we get Mr. Harmon's take on this? He's been a principal,
Okay.
he's lost students, and had students.
Yes, Mr. Harmon.
Can you just give your
take on, is it transfers, is it a big deal? Are you concerned about it? What's your thought?
Yeah, so I think that, with anything that you're looking at, and I know transfers is what we're talking about right now, you've got to look at the data, because I will say that sometimes the perception and the data does not match. So what we're in the process of doing right now is, as Kim mentioned, is pulling the data of transfers so we can actually see that. So yeah, I think you got to start with the data, and then, like I said earlier, I'm not trying to make these answers over general or non-specific, but with anything, it's got to follow the rules. So once we look at that data and we see what's happening, and then we're able to look into those a little bit more closely, are they following the rules? Are we enforcing the rules that we have in our handbook that are made up by our member schools? So that's the expectation, is that everybody follows those rules. So specifically with transfers, we want to see what the data is, what does that look like, and as we begin to look at that more closely, are our rules being followed?
Coach Ms. Vickers said something very important. The school has to ask you to investigate, correct?
That's not correct. Well, no. We will investigate when they do that, but there is a line in our handbook that says anything that we feel like we need to look into, we can. So.
But the school can request it too.
Yes, and what Ms. Vickers was saying was, anytime a school asks us to look into something, we most definitely are going to do that.
Any other questions on this? Thank you. This next one is probably for you, JT. This reporter, the question he asked was, he says, one of their players was named the MVP of the state basketball tournament, and he didn't get picked for the Alabama-Mississippi AllStar team. How are these picked, and who are these crazy people picking it?
Yeah. Ron Ingram selects all the All-Stars. So
I didn't come
direct all emails to Ron. So our all-star teams, whether it be north-south, whether it be Alabama, Mississippi, one of the biggest, I guess, perks of this job in the 2 years that I've been here is getting to watch some of these all-star games. Just some phenomenal talent. Just getting to watch them practice, watch them compete. My stomach's not in knots. I'm not coaching them. I'm just enjoying the game. But alluding to Ron's question, though, so the way that process works, we've actually, today's the deadline for our Alabama, Mississippi football nominations. Those nominations will come in from the schools directly. Those coaches can nominate their athletes. And then for Alabama, Mississippi, we have a district committee. So the state's broken up into 8 districts, District 1 starting down in Mobile and then working up to District 8 in Huntsville. And we have committee members from that, and they'll come and meet and kind of make some initial notes and comments, and then they will study film. Digital media is a great thing now. You don't have to have that VHS tape. We can just pull it up online, and so they can see a ton of film on those kids. And then they go through and make those selections, and there are some selection criteria based on having representation from each classification, having representation from the different districts, not having more than X number of kids from the same school. And a lot of times, there are schools you could legitimately have 6 or 8 all-stars off that one team. But unfortunately, just to make sure we've got that diversity across the board, and there's a fine line between that and watering down your all-star team as well. But sometimes, and you get also, so like with football coming up, Jeff Kelly, head coach at Saraland, is going to be the head coach for our Alabama team this year. Sometimes it'll play into that philosophy. Does he want to run, a certain formation? So he may want 2 tight ends instead of 3 tight ends. So that can affect things as well. But a lot of times it just has to do with that criteria. But for our north-south stuff, again, we have sports committees in each sport. We have a representative from each district, and we'll have our sports committee meetings after that sports season wraps up to get recommendations for them on things concerning specifics to that sport. And then after the meeting adjourns, they will hang around, and districts 1 through 4 select the south team, and districts 5 through 8 select the north team. So, unfortunately, there are some times where a kid may get left off, but I don't know if there's a perfect world where we can get everybody that we would like on there. Unfortunately, every year we can make the argument of, hey, this kid should have been on there probably, and I think sometimes that's just the nature of the beast.
Did you say all-star need to be in today or just football?
No, the deadline today is just for Alabama, Mississippi football. Those deadlines, we've sent out reminders through Dragonfly to the coaches. The only deadline today is Alabama, Mississippi football. Any kids not selected on that are nominated, those nominations are automatically going to go into the north-south pile, so it'll just go there. Into that, and things change. Kids, if a kid has an injury and they can't play, we have to refill that spot, and same thing with north-south. Sometimes things come up, family situations where a kid can't play, and so we're sometimes having to replace kids right at the last minute, unfortunately, but it's nobody's fault, not the kid's fault or the coach's fault. It's just how things work. But, yeah, that's the only deadline today. The other deadlines will be coming up. I think the next one will actually be north-south football, since those two games will be played in December down at South Alabama.
Any other questions? Okay. Okay, he mentioned Dragonfly. So guess what, Marvin? This next question is for you. And you're going to think I wrote it, but I didn't. This person wants to know what happened to our live standings that we used to have when we had C2C, and they also want to know why it's so difficult to print schedules. And in general, can they get a pass to get into a password to get into Dragonfly to check information?
Ron, I think this is your question, but
I have answered it many times.
So again, with Dragonfly, we did move to our content management program, Dragonfly, about 5 years ago. We do have live standings on Scorebook Live. That is our partnership that we have. We do all of our brackets, our standings, all of our rosters and things can be found on Scorebook Live. If there is a discrepancy, we ask just schools let us know, and we'll get it fixed. As we all know, with technology, sometimes things don't sync up all the time correctly. But we will get that fixed. But we do leave it up to the schools to make sure their rosters are correct in Dragonfly. All the kids are eligible, and then once those things happen in Dragonfly, that feeds to Scorebook Live. Schedules, rosters, scores, all of that in Dragonfly gets pushed to Scorebook Live. So again, all of our standings, all of our things should be in Scorebook Live. If there is discrepancies, please let our office know, and we will get those fixed immediately.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
For someone who does fighters like me, it's always annoying when I go on Dragonfly and the roster isn't up. Is there like a process that if we see a roster not up, that we can tell someone?
Yeah, you can reach out to our office. You can reach out to me, and we'll contact the school. So a lot of times, basically for rosters to show in Dragonfly, there's a box they have to check, and they just don't check that box sometimes. So ultimately, that's usually the case, and it's a simple fix.
I think the original question was talking about printing the rosters from Dragonfly. If you print them, unless maybe I don't know how to do it, but you get like 5 or 6 pages.
Yeah, so that's where I would say Scorebook Live would be where you wanted to print it, and it's a much cleaner print in a PDF. So I would print all my rosters from Scorebook Live.
I got here a little late. Have we discussed going back to a 4-man area in the football play?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Marvin. It says, I noticed in the sport, you might as well get ready again. It says, I noticed in the sports handbook there's no mention of swimming sectionals this year. Are they being discontinued, and if so, why? And they also asked the question, why has the state championship moved from Auburn to Huntsville?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to Sarah Stallkamp, Auburn University, Auburn Opelika Tourism for hosting our state swim meet in Auburn for over the last 20 years. They've been a great host. Unfortunately, Auburn was ready to move on. I know Sarah has a lot of things on her plate, and so she felt like it was time to give another aquatic center a chance to host our state championships. We also in Mobile was excited to hear they're building a new facility down in Mobile. but the current facility at Bishop State, again, did not feel like they wanted to continue hosting our sectionals in Mobile. So one of the things we presented to our swimming committee was we don't have sites. There are only so many sites in our state that can host a meet the size of sectionals in state. We've really only got about 3, maybe 4 locations that can host that. So unfortunately, when 2 of those locations don't want to host, we have to change and pivot a little bit. So what we've done is we no longer have sectional swim meets. We just have a state swim meet, which will be in Huntsville the same weekend of our sectionals, November 21st and 22nd. We're excited to take the state meet to Huntsville. They've got a brand new facility, hosted a lot of big meets up there. And so we did actually, during the COVID year, we did host our state championships in Huntsville there already. So they have hosted a state championship before, but just excited to have our state championships in Huntsville moving forward. Looking forward to a great swimming season.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving pretty fast here. Okay, Mr. Harmon, I believe these next questions are going to be for you. The first one is, you've been on the job for several weeks now. And you've already probably answered this, but what are your top priorities as you enter the first school year as executive director?
Okay, so I do think that I, talked about some of that with as far as the top priorities from the 30,000-foot view is just making sure that we have a good, solid strategic plan, because I mentioned the fact that we want to be coherent. Now, other than that, I do know that there are things that we need to make sure that we're working on. You mentioned transfers, and transfers is something that I want to know the data on that. I do have a process and a plan for that, but I believe everything that you do with that does need to be based on data. I'm not saying that that is perception. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I do want to see what the data actually says, but that's a process that we'll work through. NIL is something that I don't think that I ever have an opportunity to get in front of people where they don't ask about NIL. So I talked about that earlier as far as making sure that we have a plan. So I did talk to you about that. And then just making sure, we are a organization, association that governs rules. And so, when you think about rules, you want to have good rules, but then when they impact you or your school or your community, that's not always popular. So we want to make sure that we're being effective. We not always can be popular with that, but we want to make sure that we have a lot of confidence in our people that we are consistently enforcing the rules that we have. So those are just some of the big pieces. And then, just making sure that we maintain all of the really great things that we do. Our championship events, I could go on, but those are discussed, nationwide, and our staff does a phenomenal job with those, but want to make sure that we're maintaining that. But if I had to say, just coming in, what are some of the things that I know need to be addressed? There are lots of questions about transfers. There are lots of questions about NIL. And then just personally, as the leader of this organization, I want to make sure that there's a tremendous amount of confidence in us when it comes to enforcing our rules.
Since while you're here, one of the other questions that was sent for you specifically, are there any new programs or initiatives you'd like to implement, and how soon?
Yeah, so as far as new programs or initiatives, I don't know that I could speak to any specific, because part of that is, assessing the current reality. But, anytime we look at, programs that we are doing, it may be that they're at max effort and they're accomplishing everything that we want to do. There may be other programs or things that we could look at that we could bolster. And so for me personally, I know we're already doing some really great things as far as, professional development opportunities for our member schools. We want to make sure that we're looking at that. We want to make sure that we're looking at leadership development with the things that we do with our students, with our student leadership. And so I'm very interested in looking at that. I think that what you'll hear from me is that we want to make sure we're always looking at a process that is a continuous improvement. Okay, so we always want to look at plan, do, study, act. So what is our plan? We want to make sure we have a really good plan, and then once we enact that, once we do that, what do we think about it? When we debrief on that, we study that, and then we act. So there's going to be a process of continuous improvement. So this is a great time for me to look at some of those programs. And I know coming in, we've got some great programs that, like I said, are at max effort, and there's nothing we need to do other than make sure that they have my support, that we continue. But if we find any area that we can look at that we might could bolster, we'll do that as well.
One other question is, what's been the most surprising thing that you've seen about becoming executive director of the AHSAA?
So I don't know that, just right off the bat when you say the word surprising, I know that being in leadership, that's something that I've had experience to do, and I've been able to work with really great leaders. It's just when you look back at the people that I've been able to work for and mentored by, the leadership, it is what it is. Now, the association, there's particular things about the association. Now, I will say that I've said this again and again, but it's the truth. I'm joining an outstanding staff. So that didn't surprise me. I expected that I would be joining an outstanding staff, but when you actually get in here day to day and you see them work, it's not that it was a surprise, but it's just definitely something that I am excited about, because it is a great staff and it's a great association. And like I said earlier, I want to make sure that everybody understands that. But within that, there are things that we've got to work on, and we'll do that. So I don't know that surprises, just the fact of coming in and understanding that it's a leadership position that has impact statewide. That's something that I am interested in doing, because it's so important that we protect education-based athletics.
And then the other question is, what are you most excited about as we move into the 2024-25 academic school year? Yeah.
So I'm excited about the opportunities that we're providing for our student athletes. These are lifetime experiences. This is, everything that they do. And I'm coming out of 8 years as a building level principal at a school that had high expectations for both athletics and academics. Everything that those students are doing in the classroom, that's the reason they're there. There's no doubt about it. That's why they're there. But athletics gives them an opportunity to it's like a laboratory opportunity, because it puts them in environments where they're working with people that care about them and want to make sure that they're feeding into them, and then they're learning. And I don't want to bore you with this because you know this, but they're learning how to be a part of a team. They're learning how to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They're learning how to compete with sportsmanship and do it with class. They're learning how to lose when maybe they should have won. They're learning how to win when maybe they should have lost. They're learning how to handle adversity. So, the thing I'm excited about is just making sure that we're continuing to provide and protect those opportunities for our student athletes.
And one other question, who inspired you to go into first coaching and teaching, and they asked for you to relate one of your favorite memories? Yeah. So basically, I grew up in Munford, Alabama. I had a great, hardworking family that enjoyed athletic competition, and a lot of the conversations that I would have with my dad would be about competition. There were so many sports analogies that he would use, and just the things that he would talk about with in athletics and competing, they just transfer to life. And he would tell me, I remember I was probably 8 years old the first time I was able to play, padded football. And in my community, that's the first thing you had. You didn't have anything before then. And so very excited. And his advice to me was, you just don't hesitate. The firstest with the mostest is what he said. So, you learn to be confident in what you're doing and not to hesitate. You learn to leave things better than you found it. You learn to have class. And so I went on from there and played for great coaches and had great teachers at Munford High School. That went on to Jack State, had some opportunities to be around some great coaches and people at Jack State. So my first week on the job here, my first job out of college was at Etowah High School. I worked for Raymond Farmer. He just turned 81 years old, and he called me my first week on the job to remind me of how blessed I was to have started on his staff my first year out of college. And I told Coach, I agree with you 100%, and I do. That was, and then went on to be a part of, staffs and work for people that, when I decided to go into administration, who were able to mentor me. And I have been blessed with the people that I've been able to work with. Of course, that Etowah team had a boy named Cadillac on it, didn't it?
Yeah. So my first year was Etowah High School. We had Carnell Williams was a freshman and Derek Nix was a senior. So Derek's now the offensive coordinator at Auburn. They were in the same backfield. We advanced to the state championship game, and Blunt held us to 50 yards rushing. True story. I was the offensive line coach, so that was 50 yards rushing with those two running backs. Luckily, they brought me back for the second year. But great memories and great people. We just celebrated in 1999. We won the state championship, and we just had the 25-year reunion. And just going back, the interesting thing about that is I've been telling stories about that team for 25 years, and I often wonder if I started embellishing any of those stories. And so when I went to that reunion, they were all telling the stories exactly the way I remember them, and I thought that was really cool. So it turns out that I wasn't embellishing any of them. Those things really happened.
Okay, appreciate it. And now that was the last question, and we can open up to the floor if anybody has anything. But
when I got to take the interview, you got to know you on a personal level. Could you explain Harmon's don't pack loose wagons? That's the greatest analogy I took away from our interview.
So I had an opportunity to do a history assignment where I had to interview a grandparent. And my dad's dad, we grew up on a very small farm. They didn't do that full time. They had jobs, but we always had about 50 head of cattle and did square bale, hay and stuff like that. So that's what I grew up doing. And my grandfather was very quiet, hard worker, but very quiet. And when I did the history assignment, I had about 5 questions, and we talked for 2.5 hours. So 5 questions led to a 2.5-hour conversation. And at the end of it, I just said, "Why have you never told me these things?" And he just looked at me and he said, you didn't ask. So I didn't know what to ask, right? So, but his father was 50 years old when he was born. He was born in 1930. So when they were coming through the community of Munford and taking dads that had kids his age off of the farm, they were all sharecropping. When they were taking them off of the farm and started paying them to do jobs for the first time, his dad was too old to do that. So he was one of the last kids that kind of stayed with that. And he was explaining how that they were farming on thirds, and literally that was, they packed 3 wagons and they got to keep some wagons, and a wagon went to the McElderys. And he was talking about how that if you wanted to, the wagon that was going to the McElderys, you could pack it loose and keep more for yourself. But he said the one thing that they took a lot of pride in was that Harmons don't pack loose wagons. And when I talked about those things, I heard that for him for the first time, but it was really the same type things that I'd been hearing from him through athletics. How you do anything is how you do everything. So, I think that is, whatever I've done, I've tried to make sure that's what I'm doing, and the actual specifics of the job may change, but those type things, who you are and how you go about your business, doesn't change. Oh, I'm sorry. Your point. No, you're good. You point.
I guess maybe that's what it is. But Super Sevens, is there any update on just?
There will be soon. So there will be an update soon on that. There's a process that we go through with that. There's a meeting that we have pretty soon that needs to happen first, and then we'll be sharing our plan for that. But that'll be soon.
Mr. Stone.
Mr. Harmon, thank you. Congratulations on the new job. I'm Ron Stone from Hollywood Sport. My question is, we don't make enough money on the local level. You've been a principal for 8 years, but right now, Hollywood is in an 8-man area, and 4 of the teams are in DeKalb County, which is over 50-something miles away. I've asked this when from the other Alvin Briggs and Say Reeves was here. Why do we have to travel? He said, well, we've got to make it even when we divide up these areas so everybody travels the same. But in our school this year, we go back to a 3A. We have one team we play in Coleman County. So we cannot line up any teams in Coleman County that will make us any money. Now, if we went back to a 4-man area and take our bye week and make it a playoff game, we could still have, the state could still have the same amount of money as far as playoff games go. But we could make money by inviting teams in our area, because we don't carry that big of a crowd when we go to Asbury or Fife or somewhere like that, and they don't bring them home either. So we're hurting, and on the school level, we need to make more money, and we need to make it on the football program or basketball program, whatever program we have. Are you going to address that? It's your first line of business.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And, we have a process that we work through on that. And anytime that somebody has a concern like that, I appreciate you sharing that. But, I'm sure there's other things involved in that as well that we have to look at.
Well, I know it was on the docket in Central Florida. My high school coach and principal wanted to, he voted for going back to the 4 years. But it got voted down by somebody, Central Florida or something. So we need to address that situation because these are small high schools are hurt, especially if I travel a long way.
Other questions? Well, let's give this panel a round of applause.
Can I say something? This is not really a closing remark, but I took a note, Ken, when you were up here, you were asking him about the officials. I had a chance to go down to the, was it one of your football camps? State camp. And he had a panel, and he had invited head football coaches, and the officials asked the head football coaches questions. And I just thought that was, and in leadership, you learn that typically whenever you're trying to figure something out, there's one word that always comes up that we could do better: communication. And guess what they talked about? They talked about communication. But I thought that, Ken, was a great job. And as far as when you were asking him about the officials, just them being able to hear from some head football coaches, that's something I want to mention. I thought was a very positive thing as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Any other questions? Listen, we do have, if I can get this right. There we go. We're going to, in just a minute, we're going to, before we break this session, we're going to give away 10 yearly passes to the NFHS network. And it's a real good thing to have, especially for media, because it's going to be a media subscription, which will allow you to make clips from the games. If you hear about a great game, you can go to it, find it, and pull the clip. And for your TV, you can use it on your telecast for your highlight shows if you choose. All they ask is that you credit the school that you're getting the highlight from. And if you know the camera person or if you know the producer at the school, it helps if you said, you give a shout out to them, because these kids love that. They really love that. And these kids are not playing, but they're providing all these highlights for these athletes. This is a media pass. We send this out to the media every year. If others that want to get a media pass, you can do the same thing with that pass. It's not just a pass to see all the games. And you can see not only the games in Alabama, but all the games across the country in every sport that's on the NFHS network. But you can pull highlights again from it for your own media needs. Now, don't pull them and try to sell them, because that's against the rules, as you well know. But you can use them to help in your coverage of the games. We actually requested this media credential during the COVID year, and it came at the request of our TV stations, because in the COVID year, nobody went out to the games, especially when we hit the basketball season and we were in the region and area and sub-region. And so they provided this. They gave us actually free passes that year, and we gave them to just about every TV station that wanted one. And they were able to get highlights of basketball, and it really helped them in their coverage. And so they took it nationwide the next year, and this has really become popular all across the country. But we thank our own TV stations, particularly for asking for the help and using it. But it is an annual pass that you get every year, just like a regular subscriber would have.